Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're going to talk about price increases. This video is sponsored by CMO Games. More on that later. So we're getting ready to wrap up the year, and obviously some of the great deals in Games Workshop products or on Warhammer are starting to slowly but surely dry up. It seems like when they release new boxes or make little changes that a lot of the value or like savings that we used to get seem to be going away. We've seen it most recently with the combat patrols. They are definitely just not as good a value as they used to be. The new ones coming out have substantially less savings than the old ones. For instance, the Space Marine one in particular has almost no savings over buying the individual models or some of the other sets. We also saw a new Necron combat patrol coming out, and the new Necron combat patrol has a bunch of recycled, easy to build models from the previous edition. And it's not that it's a bad combat patrol or anything like that, but the actual value is just not there in the same way. And then on top of that, we had the Christmas boxes as well, and we saw those things go up from basically $200 to $220 for the Sigmar boxes, which is a 10% increase. We saw the 40K boxes go up from $200 to $230, which is about a 15% price increase. And as we get towards the end of the year, as we get towards January, February of 2024, we know for the last 2 years in a row, Games Workshop has raised prices. And I suspect that this year is not going to be any different. So I'm starting to get a little bit concerned for Warhammer because it's already pretty expensive. It's getting much more expensive. And even though it's a luxury good or a optional hobby, and compared to a lot of other hobbies, it's actually not that expensive. And realistically, most people who want to play Warhammer can afford it. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people have families of rising costs from other situations like energy bills, insurance, etc. And at some point in time, even if you can afford it, it starts becoming difficult to justify spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on what turns out to be like dwindling amounts of plastic kits. So that being said, Games Workshop has not officially announced a price increase yet, but this is last year's article from February of 2022. And this was Games Workshop's important pricing news. And the update basically just said that, hey, you know, things are getting more expensive, so we're raising prices. And I don't want to get ahead of myself on this one, but I suspect we're going to see something very similar as well. So I thought, why not reflect on what they said was going to happen and then what actually happened, and then see what we could probably expect coming up for next year and what kind of price increases, if any, we're going to get. So it starts off by saying you can hardly pick up a newspaper to see a headline today without mentioning of rising costs. Electricity, gas, raw materials, shipping, inflation is abroad in the land and we're not immune to its effects. And if you pay attention to actual like UK inflation right now, it's statistically, or at least on paper, coming down in a lot of countries. Not that the prices are actually going down to where they used to be, but the acceleration of inflation is decreasing. So the prices aren't actually going down on stuff, they're just not going up as fast. So regrettably, we'll soon be increasing prices a little. At least that's what they claim. So in many cases, this will be about 5%. So an example of what you can expect on most kits, a box of Space Marine Intercessors will go up just £1 from 35 to 36. But like realistically, we know that's not even 5%. So the example they use isn't even accurate because a 5% increase is the equivalent of 1/20th. So like on a $35 box, that would be about £1.70 that it would go up, or closer to £2. So the example they use is actually like not an accurate representation of what 5% even is. Not to mention that's actually not what they raise prices. They raise prices substantially more than that, at least in the United States. So a few things are going up about 10%, e.g. books, scenery, and resin miniatures. And we did definitely see them go up at least 10%. A lot of the actual terrain sets went up closer to like 20 or 25%. And then the new stuff coming out was substantially more expensive than what would have amounted to like a 10, 20, or even like 30% price increase. There's a couple of outliers, e.g. Blood Bowl teams and metal miniatures, which are going up around 20%. And we see now Games Workshop is definitely getting away from a lot of the old metal miniatures. They've rolled Forgeworld into the actual like Warhammer store. And in many cases, we're now seeing some of the Forgeworld prices are actually like comparable to like the regular Games Workshop kits, because those kits have gone up so much, which sounds crazy, but we'll take a look at an example in a sec. So this was announced at the end of February, and the price changes will come into effect on the 7th of March. So basically they gave us about like 2-week notice. And at that point in time, a lot of stuff was still out of stock for like Christmas season. So you couldn't even like buy the stuff that you wanted at those prices before it went up. And I suspect if they do this price increase again, it's going to be the same situation, because there's a lot of kits, especially in the United States, that haven't been stocked up in like 3, 6, 9, even 12 months in some cases. I mean, I have literally been trying to get enough Armiger War Dogs to finish my Chaos Army for like this entire year. It's absolutely insane. We just saw like Gladiators come back into stock, which was awesome because they have been gone for basically like 6 or 9 months in the United States. And there's a lot of other stuff like that as well. So they go on to say there are 2 bits of good news. There's a heap of things we've been able to keep at the same price. There are certain currencies where we won't be changing any prices. And a lot of the stuff that they said they were going to keep the same price, they actually ended up raising using like shrinkflation. So for instance, they specifically came out and said, we understand that no one likes price rise, and so we've done our best to minimize any changes and keep the things you use every day, paints, etc., at their current levels. So specifically the paints is one of the things that really like perturbed me, because what we saw was like the shrinkflation in the washes. So they basically kept the prices the same, but instead of using 24 milliliter bottles for the washes, they dropped down to the 18 milliliter contrast paint containers. So that was the equivalence of basically 25% less product, which is closer to like a 33% price increase, because you're paying the same, but you're only getting 18 milliliters instead of 24. So if you wanted to go out and buy the last 6 milliliters, you would have to spend another 1/3 of the price. So that's like a 33% price increase. So even when they said they were going to keep the prices the same, they actually just found tricky ways to raise the prices. And then they also came out and said that they weren't going to be raising prices on starter sets, but obviously we see with the new edition, the new starter sets came out and then they raised the prices on those. So sure, they didn't raise the prices on the old stuff that was about to go out of stock and be discontinued, but all of the new stuff went up in prices, which is a tricky way of basically being like, we're not going to raise prices on the existing stuff because we want to make sure that that's gone, because we're making way for the new stuff that's going to cost substantially more. Now a quick message from today's sponsor. CMO Games has been selling Games Workshop products online for over 20 years. They carry the full line of Games Workshop products, including Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, Necromunda, Blood Bowl, paint tools, and more. Almost all Games Workshop products are priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games takes pre-orders for most Games Workshop products released at their earliest date possible. 12:01 a.m. on Saturday, they go live. Most of these pre-order products are also priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games offer free shipping in the US 48 with an order of $50 or more. Their customer service is top-notch and they ship most orders within 24 hours. Visit CMOGames.com using the affiliate link in the description and let them know that you heard about CMO Games from Warhammer Man. Now back to the video. So if we scroll down here, there was like the excluded currencies. They said they weren't going to raise prices for the Aussie, New Zealand, Japan, and China. Obviously, they're trying to break into like the Asian markets. So I understand that they're trying to basically like grow the business there. So they don't want to just start raising prices and immediately turn people off towards it. We also know that Australia and New Zealand have suffered from extremely high prices for a long time. So that's really not that surprising. So that being said, what does this really mean? Should we expect another 5 to 10% increase in the price of Warhammer? Yes, I think we should. So for a lot of people, this means, just leaving the hobby altogether. For a lot of other people, it means just pulling back in the meantime and working on their pile of shame. A lot of people have switched to other game systems or 3D printing, other alternatives. And unfortunately, a lot of people are also starting to buy recasts and 3D printed knockoffs, which in my opinion is unfortunate, because when someone is basically doing that, they're supporting a black market. And I understand they're doing it out of necessity or out of want. But the fact of the matter is that eventually drives up prices for everyone else. So we know Games Workshop basically got rid of Forgeworld, or at least like rolled it up into like the greater package. So now everything is under like the Warhammer.com flag, and the Forgeworld stuff is basically just like 15 plus marked right here, or expert kits. But for instance, the prices on actual like Warhammer single miniatures and whatnot have gone up so much that now some of the Forgeworld prices aren't even higher. Like in some cases, they're actually lower than the individual miniatures from the actual like plastic Warhammer range, which to me is just absolutely insane, because for the longest time, not only did I not buy the Forgeworld resin models because, well, they're resin, but also because some of the prices were insane. But we recently saw these necromunda like squat characters come out, and this one is the Urson Grimjarl Jardlin Nomad Hunter. And this is a Forgeworld kit right here, obviously sold under the Warhammer banner, but we see the 15 plus, it is resin, etc. It's technically 2 models. Obviously this guy's just like a little assistant, but it's $36 for that individual model. And then this was the one that came out next to it. This one was $39, again, single model, and then like his little buddy, $39 for that, which obviously is crazy that at this point in time, the go-to for individual models is like around $40. But the really crazy part is if we just check out like some of the new Necron models that were released, or in this case, like the initial release of a previously available model that was never sold separately, like the Royal Warden, we see the Royal Warden is $35 in plastic. He was in like a million starter sets from the previous edition. So you can pick them up like super cheap on eBay or whatever from a buddy. But this is like just released for the first time individually, $35 for him. Then we have a new model, which is the Overlord with Translocation Shroud, $38 for him. And then of course we see like the unique or like special characters are now priced at like $45 for just a regular old guy, which is obviously crazy. But the thing that jumps out to me on this is like the regular models that are coming out now are actually like the same price as the individual Forgeworld models. And I mean, it wasn't that long ago, and actually Games Workshop still has some of like the fantasy models in the range that are priced for like an individual character at like $15. So in the last couple of years, we saw some of these like older sculpts that have been around for ages go from like 15 to like 25 to like 28. And now we're seeing just the go-to price for an individual model is like $35 to $45. I mean, it's bad enough that a 5-man squad for 40K or something like that is priced around like $60 as their go-to now, in some cases 65. But paying for individual models close to like $40 or more is pretty crazy. And the fact that now like the actual Forgeworld resin models are in line with the plastic just shows you how much the actual inflation has gone up on these models. So sure, technically they didn't raise the price on some of the existing stuff by more than like 5, 10, or 20%. But by just making everything that comes out now substantially more expensive, and then the older stuff seems a little cheaper, eventually they raise the price on this to catch up with the new stuff. And I can totally understand how people feel like Warhammer is becoming unaffordable. And honestly, I'm definitely getting concerned for Warhammer because I want it to grow. I love people to be able to play the game. I know it's not the cheapest hobby there is out there, but there's definitely ways to like cut some corners and save some money. But also one of the things that's going to make this hobby last for a long time is young people and new players being able to get into it. And the fact of the matter is you used to be able to go into a shop and buy like a blister of minis or a box of models with like pocket money. You know, you might even skip lunch a couple days and then use that lunch money to go pick up some new models. But I mean, that's just not even realistic at this point in time. I mean, if you're a kid, even if you're working a part-time job or something like that, I think Warhammer has become basically unaffordable. And like I said, for a lot of us, most of the people that watch this channel, most of the people that play Warhammer are adults. Most of them are making decent money. But the fact of the matter is, if you have a family, you have priorities, other bills, energy, electricity, insurance, whatever it is, it's getting harder and harder to justify spending crazy money on what amounts to plastic toys. So I don't know for sure if Games Workshop is going to be raising prices again this year, but they have done it the last few years in a row, and they have basically hit us with one of these announcements in 2021, 2022, and 2023. And of course, even when they didn't announce stuff, or like I said, when new stuff was coming out, they were raising the prices on them as well, the shrinkflation, all that stuff. And it's definitely to the point now where it's become a real issue. So I'm not trying to create any like last minute FOMO. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer or anything like that. But I'm curious to hear everybody's opinions in the comments. I feel like a lot of the people were priced out in the last couple of years, still kind of interested in the hobby, maybe just grinding on their pile of shame, but definitely pulling back on their purchases. And I have a feeling if this trend continues, we're going to see a big acceleration over the next couple of years as people really have to like hunker down to deal with rising prices. So let me know what you guys think down below. Always like to hear back from you guys in the comments. Special thanks to CMO Games for sponsoring the video. Check out the link in the description to save 15% on Games Workshop products. That's it for today. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm concerned for the future of Warhammer if this trend continues. And it probably is going to keep going up in prices. And I'm out of here.